Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the place where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and no one is going to judge you or roast you or try to fight you or call you any names. This is not a fighty show. This is not a show for debating or bullying or harassing. I don't believe that shit is productive, and so I do not have it on my live stream. So you don't got to worry about if you're a left-wing person or a right-wing person. You can ask your questions here on the live stream, and no one's going to call you a fascist or a cuck or anything like that. What's up, Eliminate All Foids? You changed your name to Goy Destroyer, is that right? Seems kind of strange. Because a goy is just a non-Jewish person, right? So, like, maybe it doesn't seem great, you know? But, maybe there's something I'm missing. You can let me know. What's up, Andrew123? Any questions about politics, everybody? Just throw them in the chat. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I am not here to judge. I am just here to answer all of your various questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be they left-wing or right-wing. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language because there's all these different abbreviations and agencies and esoteric sounding procedures that if you don't know what those things are, it can be really difficult to be part of the conversation that is discussing what is going on in our country, government, and world. Andrew123 says, what is your view on immigration in Europe? Immigration is a net positive for whatever country is accepting those immigrants. So I guess I would say I'm for it. We're also living in a time of particular instability, both both in the sense of people being safe from war and also there being unprecedented climate catastrophes like massive weathers and diseases that weren't in certain places and insects that weren't in certain places are now in different places. So people are going to be moving around. And I think it would behoove all of us if everybody could be fucking chill about it. I know a lot of people are not going to be chill about it, but this is me desperately hoping that somebody hears me. Like, there's going to be people moving around, and you might be the person moving around, or somebody might be moving into where you live. And, you should just recognize that both the person who is staying where they are and the person who are moving to a different place, it is not their fault. They did not start these stupid wars. They did not pump millions and billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, despite the fact that our scientists were saying not to. So everybody needs to be fucking chill about it. Okay, Callum says, can we talk about how ICE is going to be in airports? How is that going to be like? Yeah, nobody really knows what they're supposed to be doing there. Like, I guess the idea was that because TSA is not getting paid right now, and all of them are like calling out sick because they're tired of working without pay, that somehow ICE is going to do the job of the TSA, which they are not trained to do. They're not even trained to do their job. It kind of feels like the entire point of them being there is to kidnap and torture more brown people, So prove me wrong, I guess. What's up, Cam? Hamjor says Berenstein, in quotation marks, seems a little anti-Semitic coded. Would you like to rephrase, Hamjor? Let me know. Real Burberry says, what's your thoughts on a specific group controlling / own every major media from news to even TikTok? I believe the major group you're talking about, the specific group you're talking about, is billionaires. But please feel free to let me know if there's another group you wished to be prejudiced against. 14N says, who should be the next U.S. president? Well, first things first, Democrats should win the primary. Democrats should win the midterm elections in 2026. 2026 is coming up, and we got to get everybody out there voting. I would love to see unprecedented voter turnout in 2026. Let's see an increase in all those numbers, and let's see what kind of representation we can get in Congress based off of that. But after that, in 2028, I like Chris Murphy. D. Scott says, "Did you hear about the accident at LaGuardia?" I did hear about the accident at LaGuardia. Andrew123 says, "What do you think of the release of the UAPS UFOs files?" I have not seen anything substantive in there for me to get excited or scared about. It's all just like the same kind of, oh, there's a bunch of weird shit out there kind of shit. Callum says, "Yeah, bro, I'm going to the Bahamas on Saturday, and I'm black. Parents are white, so I'm scared." Callum, I am not going to tell you that you do not have any reason to be scared. You 100% should be scared. Make sure you have all your documentation on you. Stay in between your white parents, so they protect you, I suppose. But, yeah, it's scary. It is really fucking scary out there. All right, John Bradley says, "Thoughts on Lindsey Graham being in a runoff? Is the challenger more MAGA?" I'm actually unfamiliar with that race, unfortunately. Tim Bradford says, "Whose side are you on? Palestine or Israel?" I'm on Israel's side. I am on the side of the citizens, Tim Bradford, but I am against the governments of both of those countries. Is there a reason why you are siding with Israel, even though the government of Israel has been found to be doing war crimes and genocide against the people of Palestine? Let me know, Tim Bradford. What's up, Ms. Gonna Be? Good to see you again. Cam says, "What happens if the November elections are won?" There are a bunch of different scenarios that could play out, Cam, depending on, if Democrats take the House, if they take the Senate, and if they do, by how many seats. At the bare minimum, we can stop anything new from getting passed by the Trump administration. We can stop more cabinet nominees from being voted on. We can stop more psychotic right-wing judges from being sat on the bench. We would be able to control investigations, so we wouldn't have any of these kind of just for show Senate hearings and House hearings. We could potentially start seeing impeachments for various Trump cabinet officials, and depending on how many seats we get in the Senate, we could even have an impeachment of Donald Trump. But yeah, there are a bunch of really good things that can happen if people get out there and vote for Democrats. I think it's really important that the Republican Party suffer electoral consequences equal to the human rights violations and violations of our civil rights that they are enabling. Central UFC says, "Bettenstein." I think you probably meant Berenstein. That also, it's anti-Semitic coded. Would you like to rephrase that, Central? Let me know. Wacko Mind says, "Should voting be mandatory?" I don't know if voting being mandatory is a good idea or not. I know Americans are kind of hostile to the idea of being forced to do something. I say just make voting easier, Central says, how typical that I gave you an opportunity to backpedal and you did not take advantage of it. Yeah, that is pretty typical. Midwest Mimi says, "Democrats haven't done one damn thing for this country in decades. Go buy a new dress." Midwest Mimi, would you like me to tell you a bunch of things that Democrats have done for this country in the past couple of decades? I'm going to ignore your shitty comments and invite you to be a productive member of this chat. Landon Phillips says, "What are your thoughts on past administrations not releasing the Epstein files?" So the Democratic Party has been trying to get the Epstein files out since 2019. If you ask Ro Khanna, who is the Democrat that was behind this bipartisan push to release the Epstein files, he will tell you that the Democratic Party has actively been trying to get this information released ever since 2019. Now, it's true that Biden didn't do anything specific to release those documents, but that's because the president is not supposed to be putting pressure on the Department of Justice to do anything. That is an ethical rule that the Trump administration ignored in their first term and are ignoring it even harder in their second term. So yeah, it is only the Republican Party that is blocking this legislation. Of all the votes that have happened to release the Epstein files, there are 15 Republicans who have voted on keeping them hidden, and there are 0 Democrats who have voted on keeping them hidden. Right now, everybody who's in charge of the Epstein files is a Republican, and Republicans have full control of executive, judiciary, and legislative, and they are covering up the Epstein files to protect Trump and his billionaire buddies. Period says, "I'm confused. Are the Democrats left or right wing at the moment?" The Democrats are always left wing. Aid says, it feels like everything around politics is just bad right now. What do you think could even be done? I mean, there are a lot of things that could be done, Aid. If people did the work of affecting, progressive change, then there are a lot of things that could be better in this country. At the very minimum, the thing that we should be doing is replacing every Republican that is elected into office with a Democrat. And better things will happen. I can guarantee you. Yusef, BFH says Democrats are not left wing. That's not true. Democrats are left wing. Sandy says, do you do UK politics as well? It's not really my area of expertise. Sean says, Ro Khanna is a grandstanding crook. That's not a question, Sean. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Kevin says, should The Hague hold another hearing? I think so. Ehirio says, are you a capitalist? I'm not a capitalist, but I'm also not a socialist, and I'm also not a communist. I believe that a mixed model is probably best, like what they have in Scandinavia. Titan says, what about term limits for House and Senate? I'm for it. Fog of War, great to see you again, says, do you think presidential and congressional terms are too short to get things done? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. High Move says, you would be very wrong. About what? Super Poo Poo says, aren't right-wingers on your side? No, they're not. Cam says, how would you go about removing illegal immigrants if not ICE? CBP was doing that before ICE was invented, so CBP could just do that again. Let's see here. Ronton says, do you think we are on the verge of expanding U.S. territories? That's a really good question, Ronton, and I honestly have no idea. Like, the Trump administration is both psychotic and irresponsible and also incompetent. And so it is possible that they make moves to either expand territory into Canada, Greenland, Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela, whatever. But it is also equally possible that they can't because they're fucking incompetent. Cam says, what is the CBP? It's actually the CPB, and that's Customs and Border Patrol. CBP, Customs and Border Patrol. Yeah. All right. Fiverr says, why do Democrats make laws to enable and protect PDF files? Democrats do not do that. Fiverr. I do not know what that California Senate bill is, but I am confident that is not what you said it was. Viber says, are you only talking U.S. politics or do you know European politics? I'm 99% my ability to talk about politics is American politics. Akshay says, how would ICE being at airports affect airports? I mean, it's just going to make being a brown person more dangerous when you go to the airport. Super Poo Poo says, is anti-Semitism increasing? It is, unfortunately. Waco Mine says, taxes are mandatory and most of the people who pay them are not represented properly. The politicians seem to mostly represent the wealthy who avoid taxes. Should people withhold income taxes? So I can't advocate for that because that's something that people could go to jail for. If that is the kind of protest that you are willing to do, then, you are more than willing to do it. Hold on a second. Anything Debating says, yo, AOC 2028. I like AOC. If she ran for 2028, I would support her. Alrighty. Yeah. But I also disagree that politicians seem to mostly represent the wealthy who avoid taxes. I think that there are a lot of politicians who do the work of representing their constituents. It is unfortunately the case that a lot of the mechanisms of our country are poised towards assisting the wealthy in achieving their goals. And so, let's see here. Let me get to those last two comments soon. Let's see what we got over here. Let's see here. Fiverr says, straight deflected when I proved Democrats enable and protect PDF files in California Senate Bill 145. All right, let me look this up. California Senate Bill 145. Fact check. California law does not decriminalize sex with minors. Congratulations, Fiverr. You're full of it. Anything Debating says, I'm super liberal and I wouldn't support Gavin Newsom. He's too centric. Yeah, he's not my choice for the primary, but if he wins the primary, Anything Debating, we are all voting for Gavin Newsom. I am not hearing any of this withholding your vote as a protest, or I can't in good conscience vote for a centrist, blah, blah, blah. He is going to be the better of two options if he wins the primary. Kyler says, do you think making a car payment is smart or pay it off right away if you can? I mean, I'm not really qualified to give financial advice, but as far as I can tell, it's better to pay it all off because otherwise you have to pay interest, and cars are depreciating assets. So you're basically paying more money for a thing over time that is going to be worth less, you know? Let's see here. Oof. Kate says, I don't like him, but if that's what it came down to, I'd vote Gavin 100%. The HXC Frog says, I think we learned that lesson with Hillary. You know, some people learn that lesson, the HXC Frog, but some people learn the lesson that if you convince Democrats not to vote because their candidate is too far to the left or too far to the right, then you can get a fucking psychopath Republican elected to the presidency. And so there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be hyping that position of withholding your vote to teach the Democrats a lesson, or don't vote for Gavin because he proves that Democrats are the same as Republicans. They are going to be pushing that narrative because they want Republicans to win. So we all have to do the job of making it so that that is not the thing that happens. All right, Gad, good to see you again. Wackobine says, is it not the system that is open to corruption regardless of who is in charge? Yes, but we can change the rules of that system. The reason why we have the system being the way that it is because every time Republicans have gotten into power, they have changed the rules in ways that make corruption and bribery easier to get away with, harder to catch, more legal, etc. And so by electing Democrats, we can undo some of that damage and create a less corrupt and more equitable system. Anything Debating says, if Gavin really wanted to, he could run his Republican. I think he probably meant he could run as a Republican. But he's not a Republican, though. He's a Democrat, so he's probably going to run as Democrat. Fog War Production says, having never voted Dem before, what are the objectives for the 2026 midterm? What is a win? I mean, I guess a win would just be more seats. You know, like, let's get more seats in the House. Let's get more seats in the Senate. Obviously, the more the better. You know, take over the House, take over the Senate. You know, in an ideal world, no Republican would get elected in 2026, and we would have a veto-proof majority that would be able to remove Donald Trump and JD Vance from office. You know, let's fucking do the work, right? Period says, is Trump in it for himself rather than the people? Yes, 100%. That is the subtitle of everything that Trump has ever done in his entire life. It has only ever been for himself. Anything Debating says, AOC / James Challarico 2028. Yeah, I like that ticket. You know, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'll look at that ticket. Cockney says, look at California right now, LOL. You mean California's great. I don't understand I don't know what you are trying to insinuate with that comment. Nick says, wouldn't you need grounds to remove Vance? Got much less on him. Yeah, you know, without you know, connecting all the dots, I'm pretty confident that he is complicit in everything that Donald Trump has accomplished in this term that makes him so, you know, undeniably impeachable. So that's my guess, you know, but I'm sure that somebody could you know, connect those dots pretty easily. You know, Muzz King, D Scott, Jules, Aaron Gregory, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Brad Newman says, LMFAO, post your credentials. My name is Jared. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I know a lot about politics. All right. Umpalataha says, any chance that USA will ever have legitimate number 3 party to challenge current Democrats and Republicans? The only way that will happen is if we give Democrats enough power in government to pass ranked choice voting. Because without ranked choice voting, then third parties can only ever be spoiler candidates. Republican Party is trying to make ranked choice voting illegal. So if you want it, you got to vote for Democrats. And thank you to everybody who helped me reach my second gift goal of the day. Sometimes TikTok does not give me the names, so I cannot thank you that time specifically. So sorry. Although I suspect Rena was, yeah, it was my buddy Rena. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Seb says, do you know how much about UK politics? If so, what's your view? I know almost nothing about UK politics. I'm just saying I'm a lefty, so y'all should vote for Greens or Labour. Definitely not Tory, definitely not Reform. Period says, how likely or unlikely do you think that Trump could be impeached? If Democrats win the House in 2026, then he's 100% getting impeached, full stop. He may or may not be removed from office, depending on how many seats the Democrats win in the Senate. But if Republicans manage to maintain control of both houses of Congress, then Donald Trump most likely will never get impeached again. Charlie says, I'm a Republican and I think Trump should be impeached. I agree with you, Charlie. How come you're a Republican? Any particular reason? Cam says, you don't want to know, mate. It's a dump. We need hard, illegal immigration laws out forward. I don't know if I agree with that, Cam. Immigration is a net positive, so I don't think maybe you are recognizing the value that immigrants are bringing to your country. Alex says, only U.S. politics or international? You can ask. I might not know, but my expertise is definitely in American politics. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, are you left wing or right wing? Is there any chance you would vote for Corbyn? I am a left wing, and no, there's no chance I would vote for Corbyn. Lee Treeman says, what? Le Treeman says, what do you think about the two-party systems? Does it represent or polarize? I do not believe that the two-party system is inherently polarizing. I do believe that there are flaws to it, and if we want to get rid of it, we need ranked choice voting. Charlie says, I'm just socially conservative. I do agree with some liberal economic points, but still mostly... Oh, what makes you socially conservative, Charlie? Let me know. The all-knowing Biggie says, good afternoon. Why did the CIA kill JFK? I have no idea. Maybe he was going after the wealthy. Zislam says, why can't anyone critique Israel? Many people can critique Israel. Zislam, I critique Israel all the time. I critique Netanyahu and fucking his entire extreme far right-wing genocidal, coalition. Los Casotila says, what do you think about communism/socialism? It depends on how you define them. The things I like about communism are like employees owning the means of production. And the things that I like about socialism are, pooling our tax money and using it to pay for things that we all need, like paved roads and public schools. But any more extreme than that, I am not going to die on that mountain. Akshay says, why was the USA blocking aid to Cuba? Trump really wanted Cuba to fail so that they could be justified in annexing the island. Alrighty, Jong G. Willem says, do you think socialism is a form of idealism? I guess it could be, depending on how you define it, but that's not how I define it. Lostila says, I hate liberals almost more than conservatives as a socialist. I don't think that is a productive attitude to have. Los Casotilas, just because you have not been able to successfully sell socialism to liberals does not mean that they are bad people. The Love for Yearning says, what do you think about gay people? I'm for them. The all-knowing Biggie says, casually causing the foil hats. Do you come out with a JFK? I don't know what that means. Do you support, user button number says, do you support the Cuban government? No, I do not, but I do support the Cuban people. John G. Willem says, do you think everyone in theory should be a moderate? No, I do not. Our Pale Horse says, aren't both parties just fan clubs with mascots that change every 4 years? No. There are wildly different things that happen depending on who is in charge, both on the state and federal level. There are people alive today because of insurance changes that the Democratic Party did. There are women who are dead today because of abortion changes that the Republican Party did. So 100%, it is not just two teams with different mascots. All right. The Drama Masks asks, is Gen Z a good generation? I mean, I think every generation has got its good and bad, Luisito says, we need a one-party communist system ASAP. I don't agree with that. The Love for Yearning says, American politics has been shifted to the right, but it's also been shifted to the left, I don't know if we would have politicians like Mamdani and AOC in the past, but because, you know, the spectrum of the left has expanded to include people like that now we have great progressive candidates like them. Alrighty. Christian Rangel says, why do we still have the Electoral College? Because people keep on voting for Republicans, and Republicans are the only ones who are keeping it from keeping us from getting rid of it. Because it benefits them. It benefits them politically. Now, there's a thing called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact that would completely nullify the Electoral College. We just have to give a bunch of people, put pressure on their state representatives to enact the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. But I fucking love the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Everybody should encourage their state reps to sign up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I'm going to keep on saying it so that it gets you know, tattooed into everybody's minds, you know, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. User Old Butcher Number says, why don't you support the Cuban government? They're oppressive. They're an oppressive regime. You know, they don't do a great job of taking care of their people and respecting their people's rights, even if there are things that they do better than the American government, for example. Righty, Kimmy says, I have an election reform I made as an idea. What is it, Kimmy? I want to use composite alignment in elections to remove the influence on them. I don't know what that means. The love for yearning says the American government is worse than the Cuban government. I'm sure an argument could be made. I'm not prepared to make that argument. Rams says, do you think we need more politicians like Fetterman and Thomas Massie? No. Thomas Massie, he's earned at least a modicum of my respect for being part of the bipartisan Epstein coalition. Fetterman is completely full of shit. So this is not about standing up to your party because you legitimately believe that they are wrong about something. Like they're, you know, centrism for centrism's sake is valueless. You know, like you need to have values, and all the values that John Fetterman claimed to have when he was running, he's completely reversed on. Matti Gishi says, do you know what's going on in Italy? No, I do not. Manu Madrid says, is Israel a genocidal country? No, Israel's not a genocidal country. Unfortunately, they're currently being led by a genocidal administration. Luisito says, to hold power over the global commerce. I don't know what that means. Beaverino says, can you block the Yahtzees? I can block the Yahtzees. If you see them, let me know. Dom says, why did Dems lose so badly last election? There's a bunch of potential reasons that people trot out for this. I think the two biggest factors are, number one, incumbency bias. People were just mad at whoever was in charge. And so political parties all around the globe felt that, you know, if they felt that incumbency bias hurt them, regardless if they were left, right, or center. And I think billionaire-funded propaganda, drenching all of our noodles on social media was a big part of it as well. Luisito says, how does the U.S. move away from imperialism democratically? We vote for people who are not down with imperialism. Akshay says, was the election potentially cheated? There has been some interesting information coming out of Rockland County to suggest that, but it hasn't been proven yet, and I think it's dangerous to suggest that it has been proven when it hasn't. Thank you, East Meets Westy. I appreciate you repeating that. Tyro says, do you think Ramsey has a chance? I don't know who that is. Unfortunately, Roto Ganger says, so if I may ask, think on what Trump said at his Memphis, Tennessee visit today? I didn't watch his Memphis visit today, so I'm not sure exactly what it is you are referring to, unfortunately. Okay. Let's see if anybody is leaving chats over here. Oh, whoops, I gotta turn off the audio there. Okay, Waco Mine says, the USA only exists because of war, potentially because by association. They now exist to perpetuate war. If anything, the question becomes, is USA a war slave? I don't really buy any of these arguments about, like, America being intrinsically this or the two-party system being intrinsically that. Like, all of this stuff is happening at the will of specific human beings. Cat69, please stop that. So if we change the human beings that are in charge, we can potentially change the system. We can make it so that America is not a country that is, that sustains itself through war and through the military-industrial complex. TJ says, thoughts on Virginia, the state? It's a great state. I love Virginia. Flipcoin says Socialist Party or Liberal Conservative Party. What are you voting for? I'm not really familiar with either of those parties. Obi Dan, Trump bought futures today and is manipulating the oil market with his speech. That makes 100% sense. He is a corrupt piece of shit who only cares about lining his own pocket and stealing taxpayer dollars. So obviously he's gonna do that shit. Alrighty. Ottoman says, I'll send you a video, watch it. I probably won't watch it, just letting you know. Ramsey is running for governor in California. Is he a Republican or a Democrat? I'm voting for Katie Porter in the primary for governor of California. Not American says, opinion on anti-Trump Christians. I mean, I think that there are a lot of pro-Trump Christians who do have their heart in the right place and have just been lied to for so long that they don't even know what the truth is. But I think that if you do want to be a real Christian, you have to be anti-Trump. Like, I don't think that there is a way to be a Christ-like person and be pro-Trump at the same time. You know, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven. You know, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Ready. Mickey Wicks says, what do you think about Trump idea a Europe join to war in Iran? No nations should join America in our stupid, reckless, irresponsible, dangerous, illegal war in Iran. Full stop. Akshay says, why did Republicans vote no to paying the TSA? The Republican Party is trying to use services that Americans miss, like the TSA, to pressure Democrats into funding the Department of Homeland Security so that they can give more money to ICE and Customs and Border Patrol so that they can build more detention facilities and then kidnap, torture, rape, and murder more brown people. What's up, Willie? Good to see you again. Lioness says, what do you know about undeclared sites in Tehran with uranium and nuclear weapons documents? I know almost nothing about it. If we want to extract the enriched uranium from the various sites that they're in Iran, first we're going to have to find them, which is going to be difficult. Then we're going to have to extract them, which is also going to be difficult. That is going to require a massive deployment of American forces. That means boots on the ground, which is exactly the thing that nobody wants. It means a bunch of coffins with American flags on them containing the bodies of American citizens, your sons and daughters, going over to Iran just so that they can secure more oil for fossil fuel billionaires, so they can enact the political policy preferences of Benjamin Netanyahu and a bunch of other far-right wingers in the Israeli government. Tyro says that Ramsey is running independent. All right, well, you know, I don't really know anything about him. But again, I like Katie Porter, so that's who I'm voting for. Wacko Mind says, so if you replace all the components, is it still the same? Is the U.S. political sphere similar to the ship of Theseus? It's an interesting thought experiment, Wacko Mind, but, you know, it's a little bit more like putting ink back into a printer. You know, you got a corrupted printer cartridge that is weirdly printing swastikas on everything. So we got to get a new printer cartridge in there. Right. The Love for Yearning says, Democrat is center-right, Republican is far-right. Democrats won't even give free healthcare. That is not true, The Love for Yearning. There are plenty of Democrats in the Democratic Party who are for universal healthcare. The problem is that there are some Democrats who aren't, and there is the entire Republican Party that is not down with that. And so long as people keep on voting for Republicans and for the kind of Democrats that aren't down with universal health care, then the Democrats who are for universal health care are not going to have enough political power to actually get it passed. Pepe Orozco says, you think war is over? Is Trump a bluff? The war is definitely not over, and Trump is full of shit. Beaverino says, Democrats represent corporations, Republicans, the oligarchs. We need a viable third party. That is inaccurate. Democrats represent the people and the working class. That is the reason why they were supporting the unions. during the Biden administration. It's the reason why they raised taxes on the billionaire class. There are a million things that happened during the Biden administration and Obama administrations that were for the working class. That argument doesn't make any sense. Zach says Democrats still take AIPAC. That is not true. Some Democrats still take AIPAC, but if you're looking for the politicians who aren't taking money from AIPAC, they are all in the Democratic Party. Alrighty. Connor Halberg says universal healthcare is a terrible idea. No, it's not, Connor. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Divine says, took 5 seconds to look up the definition of socialism yet. I guarantee you that whatever definition you Google, there's going to be somebody out there who says it's not the right definition. Kimmy says, and when all the candidates were against him, he got to look like a maverick. I don't know. Who are you referring to? I'm not really sure. Trump was able to look like an underdog by just making the field against him. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about those comments. The love for yearning says it's only a recent Democrat split and it's over-exaggerated. I disagree. The love for yearning, 100% I disagree. You have to remember the political motivations that exist that are pushing Democrats to do things that they might not necessarily want to do. Where if you didn't take AIPAC money, you would fucking lose your primary like that. People are just waking up to AIPAC. I've been hating on them for a while now, but people are just recognizing, like, hold on a second. It seems like AIPAC is putting a lot of money into these primaries to lose good politicians their races. And I'm like, oh, are you just discovering that that is the thing that's happening now? You know? Ready. Oscar McNamara says, do you support the Iran war? No, I do not. It is stupid. It is reckless. It is irresponsible and counterproductive. It is a waste of money and human lives. The catastrophes that were the Iraq war and the war in Afghanistan were planned, unlike this. So imagine how big of a catastrophe this is going to be. Right, Eric M. Smith says, can you explain the difference between liberals and leftists? Generally speaking, leftists are the far right and liberals are the center right. Harry says, thoughts on Restore Britain? It's a far right party. I do not support them. The love for yearning says, billionaires have always been funding the right wing, by the way, and yet left wing can still win without. They often do. You know, the love for yearning, I agree with you in principle, but I can find you a bunch of races where billionaire money lost a better politician their race. And so I give a lot of grace to the Democratic Party because they have access to so much less campaign funding than the Republican Party does. If they still take corporate money, if they still take AIPAC money, it is still better than voting for a Republican who is doing the same. Buddy Jay says, if Democrats for the working people, why are they for giving workers tax money to non-worker items? So, Buddy J, here's the thing. The Democratic Party isn't trying to take money away from workers to give it to non-workers. The Democratic Party is trying to take money away from the billionaire class and give it to workers, non-workers, the poor, the middle class, everybody but the billionaire class. That's the long and short of it, Buddy J. Kimberlina says, how can we get money out of campaigns and streamline for equality? I mean, short version, Kimberlina, just replace every Republican in office with a Democrat. Chris says, even if the U.S. wins the Iran war, will this hurt America in the long run? Yes, 100%. Okay, Kimmy says, because it's all subjective otherwise, and that's how we get Kristen Sinema and Fetterman. So, you know, Kimmy, composite alignment, no composite will do because it changes the leverage. Yeah, I still don't know what you mean by composite alignment. But yeah, you know, the issue is not having Fetterman's and Sinema's. The issue is having Republicans who increase the power of Sinema's and Fetterman's. You know, if we only had Democrats in Congress, then there would be an entire, you know, like centrist / you know, corrupt wing of the Democratic Party that we could then focus on and be like, look, those are the bad ones. Get rid of those. But instead, we have the Republican Party, you know, and so we have to do this extra dance step that makes everything more complicated and it allows people to sort of like bury accuracy in propaganda. Marquis D. Kid says, Berenstein, are you a Zionist? You know, you gotta appreciate how shitty of a question that is. Do you know what I mean? Ugh. Yeah, I guess I get a little frustrated sometimes with how rampant and acceptable various levels of anti-Semitism have become in the year of our Lord 2026. Um, so here's what I will say to you, Marquis de Kid. Again, you could have asked that question in a bunch of different ways. I do not support the government of Israel. I do not support Hamas. I do not support the Palestinian Authority. I support the citizens of Israel and I support the citizens of Palestine. As Israel is the more powerful nation, it is incumbent on them to be the ones to bring peace to that region, and that is not what they are doing. Netanyahu is a psychopath and a war criminal. Netanyahu and his ilk are guilty of war crimes against the people of Palestine. And so America should stop sending them money and weapons yesterday. Right. Ice Cube says, thoughts on migration. Immigration is net positive, so I'm for it. Oh, fuck me. Forgot to plug in my computer. This thing's about to die. Ah! Oh, no. John Selford says, end Citizens United. I concur with that. V says, do you support China and Marxism-Leninism? China is an authoritarian government, so that's probably not great. Right. Last Bite Left says, why are people saying to lock in for the primary election for governor of California? So the reason why people are saying that is because right now there are too many Democrats running, and it has the potential to dilute the vote so that the only two people who will be running in the general election in November will be psychotic Republican candidates. And so we need a bunch of those Democrats to drop out of the race. Yeah, there's like a billionaire who I think his name is like Tom Steyer or something. He is in third place right now, and I believe that if he dropped out, then either Katie Porter or Eric Swalwell could then have enough votes to at least beat one of the Republican candidates in the primary. But I could be wrong about that. All right. Horror Flicks fan says, what's more damaging, politics or religion? They both do damage sometimes. I think politics is more of a net positive than religion. Sophia, my buddy, good to see you again, says, do you think the federal government should have the power to cap prices on essential goods? Ooh, that's a really good question, Sophia. So we don't have a lot of experience with price cappings being good. Like, they happened a little bit during the Nixon administration, and it was largely viewed of as a massive failure that caused inflation. But yeah, like, what do we do, though, about, rising costs and inflated costs? I think the best thing to be done is to break up monopolies, because then you introduced competition back into the marketplace. And so I could then have an opportunity to corner the market by just charging less for that thing than everybody else's. Hey, let's see here. This guy says, are you our Führer? No, I am not. Aceback says, it's me, the Yowie guy. You gave me a really good chuckle last week, man. Thank you again for that. The Love for Yearning says, it's fair to give Dems grace, but this only happened because of Red Scare propaganda on both sides. I don't know if I agree with that on both sides thing, the Love for Yearning. People need to really look at the history of the Democratic Party and the history of how much they have gotten their shit kicked out of them by everybody for no good reason. Like Jimmy Carter was just a nice fucking peanut farmer who was trying his best. And then the billionaire class fucking went after him, convinced all of America that he was a shitty president. And then we had, a whole fucking decade of Republicans running the fucking table. And when Republicans run the table for an entire fucking decade, what do you do as the Democratic Party? You start adopting more Republican principles because they're the winner. They are winning, And now you can argue on whether or not that was a good long-term strategy, but it worked at the time. We had the Clinton administration. We had a fucking balanced budget and a budget surplus for the first time in decades, Buddy J says, everything is controlled by the Rothschild family. That is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, buddy. Please don't say things like that going forward. John says, Alex Jones was right. Alex Jones has never been right about anything. Colton the Great says, Democrats and Republicans are controlled by AIPAC. That is inaccurate, Colton the Great. If you're looking for the politicians who stand up to AIPAC and Netanyahu, they are exclusively in the Democratic Party. If you're looking for the Democrats, if you're looking for the politicians that don't take AIPAC money, they are all in the Democratic Party. If you are looking for the politicians that don't take PAC money and don't take money from billionaires, they are all in the Democratic Party. So I guess you can miss me with that nonsense, you know? Ugh, excuse me. Waco Mine says, would the election campaigning have more integrity if it included a description of the job requirements that included the cost of life associated with that vocation? The president seems to be killing a lot. Wacko Mine, honestly, I don't know. It's a very ethereal question. I'm not really sure. You know, you're asking me to do a lot of imagining in that question. God is Gray 415 says, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballots. Gabriel Kubit says, the media is controlled by Israel. The media is not controlled by Israel. The media is controlled by billionaires. Gabriel, ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Shay May Katie, great to see you again, says, should a politician get away with posting the way the president does? No. Never. No. Colton the Great says, if you go on trackapac.com, you can see that they are controlled. So that website has been found to be wildly inaccurate, Colton the Great, because a lot of politicians that we know do not take AIPAC money are listed as taking AIPAC money on that website. So Colton the Great, please do not look at that website any longer. It is inaccurate. Alex Stone says, did we land on the moon? Yes, we did. V says, do you support breaking two-party dictatorship and voting PSL? I don't know what PSL is, but the only way that we get more parties involved is if we pass ranked choice voting. Without ranked choice voting, third parties are just spoiler candidates. And if you want ranked choice voting, you have to vote for Democrats. Charlie says, are you right or left? I am left. Carmine, great to see you again. I got a mushy, right-leaning, misinformed person I'd like you to talk to. She already said she's open to it. I fucking love that. I fucking love that, Carmine. Let's fucking make it happen. Let's schedule that shit on the Discord, man. John says, did you vote for Kanye? No, I do not. I do not vote for neo-Schnazis. Sophia says, do you support taxpayer-funded loan forgiveness? So, Sophia, that is a bit of a false premise in your question, because loan forgiveness does not take any money away from taxpayers. It does not cost anything. It is just telling people that owe money to the government that they no longer owe that money to the government. And East Meets Westy and Chili Willy, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. That means it's finger hearts o'clock, the best part of the day. V says, but I feel like Democrats would not do that. Democrats would not do what, V? The Love for Yearning says, do you have a Discord? I do. Link is in the bio. V, let me know what you feel like Democrats would not do. John says, do you support fracking? I mean, if you have to do it to get us to renewables, then I'm fine with that. But obviously, the focus should be on advancing renewables. The Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the largest investment in renewable technology in our nation's history. It was revitalizing small towns with safe, good-paying, clean energy jobs. And then the Trump administration is throwing all that shit in the garbage. John Selford says, do you know if you'll be with Steve when he performs in Oklahoma in October? In OKC in October. I will not. I joined Steve at the end of November. V says, doing the ranked choice voting, that's why instead of just voting PSL, making them bigger. So the Democratic Party is largely responsible for switching certain local elections to ranked choice voting, like in New York, for example. It's still a relatively new concept, so a lot of other Democratic areas have not signed up for it. Lindsay Reed and D. Scott, thank you so much for helping me reach my first finger hearts goal of the day. But compare that to the Republican Party, which is actively trying to make ranked choice voting illegal, and you recognize that supporting the Democratic Party is the way that you get to ranked choice voting. Right, Kimmy says, I don't like how far apart the parties are now. That's where the Overton window moves. I mean, in my opinion, it is the fault of the Republican Party for how far away the parties are, because the Democratic Party is a big tent that includes centrist and leftists, and yet the Republican Party keeps on moving further and further to the right. John says, do you support the legalization movement for gardening? I do. In fact, I'm an avid gardener. Ace Bag says, why is everybody getting so political? Because politics is breaking down our doors and forcing itself into our lives. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Sophia says, but then if it adds to the national debt rather than taxes, wouldn't we pay for it in the future? So that's really interesting, Sophia. So this goes, Sophia, towards my sort of like general criticism of right-wing economics versus left-wing economics, where the right believes on giving money to the wealthy to stimulate the economy, create jobs, trickle-down economics, etc. The left believes in giving money to people that need it, and then having that money create jobs, stimulate the economy, trickle upwards, you know? And what we have seen over the last 50 years is the dismal failure of trickle-down economics. Like, we are living in that world right now. The reason why so many people can't afford to pay for a house, can't afford to pay for college or healthcare, and in some cases food, is because we keep on cutting taxes for the wealthy. Now, if you cancel student loans, you are suddenly putting a lot more money into the pockets of people as opposed to billionaire people versus regular people instead. What people do when they get money is they go out and they spend it on the things that they need. That's what revitalizes the economy. That's what creates jobs. You know? So many people, myself included, view canceling student debt as being like a cash injection into the working class. And you can, any money that you miss there, you can get back by just taxing the rich. Let me know if that makes sense to you, Sophia. Nerd Million says, rich people grow the pie, poor people grow their fun spending. That is incorrect, Nerd Million. Rich people grow their offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Poor people grow communities. All right, CA says, and the millions of people coming here when they have no housing for them. It is not the case that immigrants are causing a rise in housing costs. What's up, Ammo That Thinks says, do you think imperialism is bad, really? Wouldn't other countries be better under our control? No, I do not. People deserve autonomy. Countries deserve autonomy. Alrighty. What's up, Lauren? Good to see you again. Kimmy says, I think the only ones that should pay taxes are businesses. I mean, I think that rich people should pay taxes also. Dran Garadu says, what do you think of Romania having canceled the presidential elections in 2024? I know nothing about that, so sorry. Indubitably says, Israel deserves zero autonomy. What about the innocent civilians who are living there? Do you believe that those people who did not vote for Netanyahu or any right-wing psychopaths deserve to have their autonomy taken away from them? Lindstrat says, I'm a nationalist. Well, I am not. I don't think that's a great political philosophy. John says, do you think Epstein was an agent for Mossad? I think it's possible. I think it's possible that he was an agent for other intelligence organizations. I think it's possible that he was just a really shitty or rich PDF file who had so much compromising blackmail on other rich and powerful people that intelligence agencies worked with him. Let's see here. CV Orty says, please let me up for 1 minute. I have a question. Can you not put it in the chats? Alrighty. CA says, housing construction stopped during the pandemic. All right. Well, nothing is stopping housing construction more than ICE deporting a bunch of brown people. Sophia says, so do you mean giving the loan forgiveness to lower middle class to stimulate economic growth? Yes, 100%. Sean Z says, how do you feel about matriarchy? If I'm thinking about this in the frame of equity, then no, I don't believe in a society run by men. I don't believe in a society run by women. I believe in a society run by people, both men and women. There is a part of me that thinks they would do a better job, though. Torment, good to see you again, says, how do you feel about ICE helping the TSA? Oh, another job they're not trained to do. Torment, they're only going to the airport to arrest more brown people. That is all that's happening. The goat says, why do you advocate for open borders but don't house immigrants personally? I don't advocate for open borders, but I do believe in paying taxes to house people who do not have houses. And so I am actually, in paying taxes, I am actively housing immigrants. So you can miss me with that straw man argument. D, number one hater, says, why does the left think it's okay to use racist terms when people of color don't agree with them? I do not believe that the left thinks that it is okay to use racist terms. Is there a racist term that people on the left use regularly? D, number one hater. I find it hard to believe that there are racist terms that the left uses that the right does not use more. Alrighty. K Cacpex says, I voted for Trump, so what? So long as you ask a question, you're welcome here. Ace says he is putting ICE at the airport to test if he can put them at ballot boxes. Yeah, shit like that. BitNevo, great to see you again. How does society dismantle Fox News? It is too dangerous to be kept around. So first of all, we need to stop watching it. So if you know people who are watching it, get them to stop. If you have cable, call up your cable companies and say, I don't want to be paying for Fox News anymore. So please get rid of Fox News. And enough people do that, the cable companies will acquiesce. Oh, excuse me. Steva says, you just said brown people don't have houses and are only good for construction. No, I didn't, Steva. Gaia says, are you an anti-fascist? Yes, I am. Shadow says, is there a term if you agree with stuff on the left and the right? I suppose that would be a centrist or a moderate. Right. Nerd Million says, how would you fix the 40 trillion government deficit? Tax the rich. End of story. Chili Willy and Tink. Thank you so much for helping me reach my second Finger Hearts goal of the day. D Hunter says the black ICE agent called a house N-word. Who called them that? I certainly didn't. But yeah, anybody using the N-word, is shitty. I guarantee you there are more Republican politicians that are saying that, more Republican, talking heads that say that shit. Ooh. Wickelbein says, if people deserve autonomy, can the native nations get their land back? Wacko-mind, the issue is that now there are innocent civilians on that land. And so we have to deal with the world as it is, It is true that Native American cultures got completely fucked over. And Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my final finger heart goal of the day. But, now there are innocent people living on that land. So is there a way that we can help out the native populations without fucking over those people who are living there now? Yeah. CJ says, why is fascism bad? Because it removes people's autonomy. If the state decides that you are bad, then they throw you in jail. You have no rights anymore. You don't have a right to vote for new leaders. You don't have a right to self-determination, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The state gets to decide what you do and who you are. And that is not a good way to be, CJ. Dirk Deport says, can you talk about white genocide? It's not a real thing. In fact, all of the white South Africans that Trump imported from South Africa have all moved back to South Africa because they're like, yeah, America's too dangerous. It's a fucking shithole. The Goat says, if voting is for citizens only, why would ICE at voting centers be harmful? ICE is preparing to intimidate and potentially do violence against people who might be voting for Democrats. Kvordy says, the only way I could do that was if you had to do a little more work, and I would be happy with it. Yeah, go for it, Kvordy. We've got way too many people for me to bring somebody up on the live stream at the moment. AJ says, how do you feel about the Iran war? I'm America first, and I don't stand for it. I also do not stand for the Iran war. The catastrophes that were the war in Iran and the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan were way better planned than this war. And those were way smaller countries, so they were easier operations. So this is more illegal, more irresponsible, more incompetent, more dangerous. There's like nothing good about it. But I would encourage you not to be America first. You know, I don't believe in putting any country above any other country. Right, V says, I kind of like you, but I wonder if you are in support of black or Chinese communists. I mean, I support every human being, V, you know. I'm not really sure what you mean by black or Chinese communists. Ready, let's see here. Mandy Lane Hare says, will defunding the government by going exempt help anything in a political way? I mean, so you're talking about like withholding your taxes, right, Mandy? I can't advocate for that because you could go to jail for that. But if that's the kind of protest you want to do, I can't really stop you. If enough people did it, it might have some sort of productive way of affecting the government. But let me know even if that is what you are talking about. Harrison says, thoughts on the UK leaving USA to fight Iran alone? Good. Nobody should be helping us in this stupid fucking war. Sophia says, but since high earners usually have the most student debt, aren't the tax breaks mainly for high earners? No, Sophia. Lots of people get student loans, and not everybody that graduates college becomes a high earner. In fact, what we are seeing right now are rising rates of people graduating from college and not becoming high earners, which is part of the reason why we are suffering right now in this, student debt crisis. JXM says, I'm noticing a bunch of TikTok videos glorifying mass shooters. Is this just a recent trend? I have not seen that, but that is very disturbing. I hope you're reporting all of those videos. Victor Film says, what's the best UK political party? One of the left-wing ones, either Green or Labour. Gorlami says, does a country need to put its own people ahead of immigrants? Why not make the immigrants our own people? Also, Durka Deport says, are you a patriot or not? I like to think of myself as a patriot. Brian Barbita, good to see you again, says, how's the wife and kids? The wife is great. The kid is still in the wife, so I'll have to let you know in 6 weeks how the kid is doing. What's up, Average Joe? Weekend was great. It was my birthday, and you know exactly how I celebrated. The Love for Yearning says, asked for refuge, then locked them out of their own houses. I don't know what the first part of that statement was. The Love for Yearning says, Israelis asked Palestinians for refuge, then locked them out of their own houses. So that is somewhat accurate, the Love of Yearning, but not every Israeli is doing that. Not every Israeli is down for that. Not every Israeli is one of these shitty people who are beating the shit out of Palestinians and stealing their houses, Danimal says, sincere question, what makes you qualified to talk about politics as a writer and comedian? I know a lot about it. I've been following politics for a long time, and I'm an activist. I've been working with activist organizations and volunteering, and I communicate regularly with my representatives. So yeah, I think more so than the average person, I know what's going on. So I think you'd be surprised by how little people know about what's going on in our government. So I am here to help those people, and I'm here to let people know that there are so many levels to knowing about government. It's not an all or nothing kind of a thing. You don't have to be an expert in how a bill becomes a law in order to know what's going on in the government. V says, but do you support just one Palestine, then the Israelis become Palestinian? I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know if the Israelis want to be Palestinian, Danimal says, so it's a slanted view of politics based on your beliefs, not truly an educational approach. No, that is inaccurate, Danimal. When people ask me for my opinions, I give them, but most of the time I just tell people about the facts of what is going on in the world. Wackobine says, are the people who vote responsible for enabling the actions of the candidate that wins? Are they the getaway driver? I do not believe that voters are responsible for enabling the actions of the candidate that wins, because there's a bunch of different things that go into a candidate winning, and it is just as likely that a big group of people have been being brainwashed for decades and getting tricked into voting for shitty people, as it is that those people are just really shitty and want a shitty person to win. Pete says, are you a Zionist? It depends on how you define it. If a Zionist is Israel gets to take over all of the Middle East, then no, I am not a Zionist. If a Zionist is the innocent civilians who are currently living in Israel get to stay there, then yes, I am a Zionist. Gav says, where are you on the political compass? I'm a progressive Democrat. Spring Benny says, thoughts on AH? I'm against him, obviously. Harrison says, thoughts on Reform UK and Farage? I am against right-wing leaders and right-wing political parties. Sophia says, do you think using DEI quotas is fair if a more qualified person loses a spot to someone less qualified? Yes, Sophia, but also we've talked about this before. I don't know if you remember, but that's not what happens with DEI. DEI stops a less qualified white person from getting a job that should go to a more qualified brown person. That's the reason why DEI exists. As it stands, we are not seeing that play out. We are not seeing underqualified brown and gay people getting jobs ahead of overqualified white people. Harrison says, UK Labour member, and I was in Parliament, spoke Deputy Leader of Lords. He says POTUS is an idiot. I mean, where's the lie, you know? Taz Nemo says, he's a comedian. The answer to your Zionist question was funny because it didn't make sense. LOL. No, it makes sense. You know, again, it depends on how you define Zionism. Alrighty, let's see here. Yes, Sophia Lauren has also pointed out that DEI is also things like Braille and access ramps in public spaces, you know, so that people in wheelchairs can get around. Alrighty. So sorry, Average Joe, about the new character limit, but it has become so necessary. Average Joe says, how important do you think it should be to make the distinction between elected officials saying Congress should have been briefed on the military action versus I do not approve of this military action? To me, the first one sounds like they're kind of okay with it. Yeah, I mean, let this affect your vote in the primary. If you do not believe that your representative is as anti-Iran war as you want them to be, then fucking primary the shit out of them. Carmine says, free Average Joe. That's very funny. Genghis Dong Pussy Crusher says, DEI isn't handicap ramps. Genghis Dong Pussy Crusher the Fifth, you have broken my heart, because there is nothing that I like more than when people with hilarious screen names like yours actually have substantive and accurate things to say. But the fact that you are just on here bad-mouthing DEI means that you, unfortunately, you gotta go. That is a bummer. Lost Convict says, are you in favor of the two-party system? No. If you want to get rid of the two-party system, you got to vote for Democrats, though, so we can get ranked choice voting. Nerd Million says, would you invest in people that won't increase their earnings after giving them an education? Yeah, because I think everybody deserves an education, and you can't really tell which people are not going to increase their earnings just by looking at them, Nerd Million. It kind of sounds like maybe you're saying that you know exactly which people are not going to increase their earnings after giving them an education. Is it like a specific race or religion that you believe can't do that, Nerd Million? Are we tap dancing on the thin ice of racism, Nerd Million? Let me know. Max Kurt says, is staying uninformed a good way to remain happy? You know, it is true that paying attention to the news and politics can be very frustrating and depressing sometimes, and it can really stress you out. But I still believe that it's important to do. If reading the news makes you stressed out, then do something about it. Reading the news should not stress us out, you know? Lindsay and Aaron, thank you so much for helping me reach my first high bear goal of the day. And you guys know what happens when we get 3 high bears, right? Okay, scrolling. What's up? Always sad but truthful. Good to see you again. SLT violated says microdosing hell by staying informed. That is very funny. East meets Westy says, well, the ADA covers all those physical accommodations still. Yes, but I believe what Lauren was talking about was more specifically like the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, but I could be wrong about that. You guys do that. Hey, Super Poo Poo just straight out fucking called me in all caps Jew. So congratulations, you're out of here. V says, do you support the blockade on Cuba? No. No, I do not. It is only causing suffering for the Cuban citizens. If we want the Cuban citizens to do the work of having a non-authoritarian government, then we need to be the good guys. And we need their lives to only be getting hurt by their own government. But if we are then hurting them, then their government can turn the Cuban people against us to hide their own malfeasance. Alrighty. So, always Cyber Triple says, are you aware of Mr. Global and his outlook? It's pretty accurate. I do not know who that is. Dan the Man says, any takes from Hassan Piker? I mean, I don't love Hassan Piker. I think he's probably a net positive. What was I gonna say? There are definitely things that I disagree with him about. Alrighty. Donner says, will Triple T, I don't know. Richard Prida says, do you think people go right because of optics? It looks like things get done because they rename the Gulf. I think there's a lot of reasons why people go to the right, Richard, but I do not believe that a lot of them happen organically. I believe, and there's a lot of evidence to support this, that the billionaire class has been artificially hyping up the right wing of this country and artificially tearing down the left wing in this country. And so I think part of that is optics, like they own all of the news media and social media companies, so they are able to create narratives like Democrats are feckless and ineffective, or Republicans get shit done and they're strong on the economy and they're strong on border security and shit like that. Like all things that are lies and bullshit, but they're able to spread that message far and wide because for them, that's like spending what for you and I would be like spending a quarter, them dropping $50 million on a misinformation and propaganda campaign, Alrighty. Let's see here. Capto says, name them. Name what? Ahmed Imran says, is Pakistan the next target for Israel after Iran? I have no idea. V says, but in Cuba, it is democratic. Under Workers' Party, they vote directly to change even the constitution. From what I understand, the government of Cuba is still responsible for massive human rights violations, V. And they have been hurting their citizens. And I'm not an expert in this, but I just know that the people who have emigrated from Cuba are so hardcore against Cuba that they vote for American Republicans, which is basically the worst version of what they hate about the Cuban government, So it's not like they are innocent, Goy Mayor Cattle says, the billionaire class controls the media. I know what those parentheses means, and so I'm just going to have to go ahead and get rid of you. Goy, so sorry, but I do not allow that kind of anti-Semitic dog whistle on my channel. Kenzie Burr says, do you want Trump gone? Yes, I do. Sophia says, why does the Democratic Party usually push for more restrictions with vape, but not gardening? Sophia, I feel like we talked about this before. Sophia, it's a real bummer because I really thought you were a real person, but the way that you have been kind of like copy pasting old questions of yours, it kind of makes me feel like you're not a real person. Tink and Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. We're in striking distance, guys. We're in striking distance. Alrighty, Daniel Salguero says, which is worst, far right or far left? Far right by a long shot. Sphinx Egyptian says, Trump is too confident right now. I think this war got him feeling feisty. He seems to revel in it. I would actually disagree with that, Sphinx Egyptian. I think that Trump is seeing the negative headlines and negative consequences of this stupid fucking war. I think he is seeing people being upset about gas prices going up. I think he is getting pressure from our allies about the things like the Strait of Hormuz being inaccessible now. And so, yeah, man, Wacko Mind says, if the president is chief citizen, why can they not be citizens arrested for their crimes, such as starting an illegal war? So there is an Office of Legal Counsel memo, Wacko Mind, that says that sitting presidents cannot be indicted. And as long as that memo remains sort of like the law of the land. Unfortunately, so long as you are currently president of the United States, you are completely immune from any kind of legal prosecution. Unless there are some lawyers out there who would love to correct me on that. That seems to me the thing. Kiko says, I don't think you were smart enough to teach people about politics, but there are a lot of people who know a lot less about politics than me, Giko, so maybe you're just here to be mean to me? That seems like you're being mean to me, you know? Sam Daw says, Democrats versus Republicans, the whole system make us divided so that we stand up to Satan worshippers. That is not true, Sam Daw. There are wildly different outcomes depending on who is in charge of the government. If it's Democrats, things generally tend to get better, and if it's Republicans, things generally tend to get worse. Kiko says, I don't want to be mean. Sounds like maybe you did. All right, somebody is spamming the comments, so we're just going to go ahead and block that person. Thank you, Carmine, for beating me to it. War Master Horace says, do you think that the files are used as a distraction for something worse? Everything the Trump administration does is both a distraction and the worst thing that the other worst thing he is doing is a distraction from. So, you know, starving Cubans is a distraction from the Epstein files, is a distraction from the war in Iran, is a distraction from war crimes off the coast of Venezuela, is a distraction from ICE and CPB, building concentration camps, torturing people and raping people and murdering people, etc. Takvar says, do you know Cassidiaris in Greece? I do not. Ben Egan says, are you left or right? I am left. Gecko says, my point is just that the people need to decide their opinions about politics. It feels like a propaganda. Well, it's not. I am just here to answer people's questions about politics. When it's my opinion, I'll let people know, but when it's facts, I just say them. Daniel says, do you do a quest request, please? I don't know what that means, quest request. Beaverino says, is Ozempic generics going to be available in the US? I have no idea. Io says, why do I, as a girl, get so much shit for not being feminist? I am conservative politically. I guess it's kind of like acting in your own interests, Io, because feminism is basically just the philosophy that you should be able to do whatever you want to do, regardless of if your husband says it's okay or if your father says it's okay. Why do you consider yourself politically conservative, Io? Let me know. And why do you think it's bad to be a feminist? Because I think that being a feminist is great. I'm a proud feminist myself. Sophia, so yes, I think I asked about the alcohol industry previously, but I don't remember if I asked already about vaping. Yeah, I think basically we're discovering that vaping is really bad for you. And I don't know how it is being regulated. I don't know if Democrats are trying to regulate vapes more than gardening or vice versa. So yeah, I don't know. My guess is that vaping is just more dangerous, more targeted to kids, with less of the medicinal benefit, you know, shit like that. I don't know. Barton says, how many Democratic Party politicians actually support abolishing ICE? I don't know, but if you are looking for the politicians who support abolishing ICE, they are all in the Democratic Party. And so even if your representative does not support abolishing ICE, your representative being a Democrat helps the other Democrats who are about abolishing ICE. And you are way closer to abolishing ICE by electing a Democrat who's not down with abolishing ICE than you are nominating voting for a Republican who is not down for abolishing ICE. What's up, Kenna? Good to see you again. Exodus says, what's your opinion on farts? They are necessary. Quig Quag says, what are ways to get Israeli lobbyists out of here? Is anyone doing it? The way that you do it, Quig Quag, is you do not vote for politicians who allow themselves to get pushed around by AIPAC. And right now, the only politicians who are doing that are in the Democratic Party. So vote for Democrats. And that's how you get rid of the influence of AIPAC. Average Joe, do you think Cuban resistant groups mostly arise due to a legitimate hatred of their government or a result of their material conditions from decades of unreasonable sanctions? That's a really good question, Average Joe. And honestly, it's a little over my head. I think I am definitely open to an argument that the people who hate the Cuban government, who are exiles, are actually mad at the quality of their life because of American sanctions against Cuba. Now, again, I'm not an expert. I could also imagine that there are political, like assassinations and unlawful detainments that the Cuban government is doing to people that people have legitimate grievances with, But again, that's not my area of expertise, so I'd have to do a little bit more research on that. Sophia says, do you think the modern day feminist movement has become close to just reverse sexism? I do not, Sophia. I do not buy that 1 second. Cucumber Eater. I wanted that to be Cacum so bad. Cucumber Eater. I don't know why. I was just like, Cacum B Raider says, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I'm a Democrat. M Potato says, vote Democrat, guys. That's all you need to know. I mean, there's other things, but if you really need to distill, what do I do to fix this shit going forward? The easiest thing you can do is vote for Democrats and get other people to vote for Democrats as well. Andrew Holman says, what do you think needs to be taken place in terms of environmental protections for climate change? More investment in green technology. We need a climate corps. We need to hire people in this country who are currently out of work to be a part of construction crews to switch over our grid to being renewable. We need to be building more hydroelectric and wind and solar panels, and we need people to be laying wire down and building electric cars and shit like that. Takim says, why politician eat baby? I don't know of any politicians that eat babies regularly. Babo Baggins says, are any politicians, Democrat or Republican, fighting for consumers' right to repair? Yes, that is the Democratic Party, Babo Baggins. I can look more into that. If you send me a DM, I'll happily send you some names. Ben Egan says, what's worse, far right or far left? I answered this one already. It's far right. Far right is far worse. Ready. Let's see here. Yeah says, why are government as the billionaire class use propaganda to convince people to only vote for old, egotistical, power-hungry men that only want a war? Daniel says, capitalism or communism? I believe in a mixed model. Like, we can have capitalism so long as we have communism to sort of like balance it out. Employee-owned companies, a law that raises the minimum wage, a law that says that it's illegal for a CEO to make more than 50 times what the lowest paid employee makes, a law that says that the lowest paid employees need to have seats on the board of directors so they can have a voice in what that company does, shit like that. Is an accurate Shubu. The Democratic Party is way better. 96 Micah. Oh no, I just lost my connection on TikTok. All right, I'm back. I am back, everybody. 96 Mika says, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. El Tor Oleg says, you pro no borders. Van Peters says, I like the way you enunciate your perspective. Thank you, Van Peters. Shubhu says, both sides were fucked either way. Stop putting that. It is not accurate. Shubhu, you're in question jail. If you don't ask a question next, you're out of here. Kimmy says, until there is another system, Democrats really are the best bet. 100% accurate. Andrew Holman asks, are you religious? No, I am not. Okay, Sphinx Egyptian says, we got solar panels the county had built on our closed landfill hill. It will provide energy to area. Love to hear it. Seaflon, good to see you again. No worries, Ben. I forgive you. 96 Mika says, are you for a Bernie party? Yes, I am. Van Peter says, where do we go from here? I'm 19. I want to make a difference, but I don't feel like I can. That is an excellent intro into my spiel about what we can do going forward, Van Peters. Let me just finish this one last question here. Sophia says, but doesn't affirmative action typically favor women, which goes against the equality idea of feminism? Sophia, so there's a difference between the kind of like hyper ideal of equality versus the reality of equality. And the reality of equality says that until we have more women in powerful positions, then women are not going to be equal in the workforce. Until we have more people of color and LGBTQ in these various positions and companies and government, offices and shit like that, then those types of people are not going to be treated equitably in the system. And so DEI starts to try to fix that problem. Alrighty, so let me get to Van Peter says, where do we go from here? So where we go from here, Van Peter, is we do the work. And what is the work? If you don't know what the work is, you can go to my Discord. Link is in the bio. There's a thread there that tells you what the work is. So you can just read that, or you can listen to the words that I'm about to say about what the work is. The work is protesting, striking, boycotting, organizing, convincing, recruiting. It is putting political pressure on your representatives, local business leaders, billionaires, corporations. It is joining groups that are already doing this work, like Indivisible, Run for Something, Vote Save America, Swing Left. That is the work. And there is always something that you can do. Regardless of if you are in a red state or a blue state, regardless of if you are able-bodied or otherly abled. Right, Van Peter says, fuck yeah, I'm from NYC. Thoughts on Mamdani? I love me some Mamdani. If you're watching this show and you like it and you want to support it, there are lots of ways that you can do that. There's the free kind, like liking and sharing and just telling all your friends how great the live stream is and that they should all watch it. Or if you want to do like financial support, you can do that too. You don't have to, but I know that we're all struggling in this affordability crisis right now. But if you have the money and you have the desire to contribute financially, you can. The mechanisms are there. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime and you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free, it costs you $0 and it helps me out a ton. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And I want to shout out all of my regular financial contributors, but let me get to Am Shapiro really quick. Hold on a second. Revolution says, should cheese be legal? It is, and it should be. Am Shapiro says, are you aware that you're doing the same thing as alt-right pipeline and you're just spreading propaganda? No, that is not what I am doing. Am Shapiro, would you like me to go into the various ways in which what I am doing is not propaganda and not the same as the alt-right pipeline? Let me know. Are you even still here? Or did you just want to put that lie in the chat to discredit me and then dip? Alrighty, Conti says, I'm going to start political science next year. What's the best way other than studying interpolitics? Volunteer. Volunteer. Join a campaign. Join a political action committee. Do stuff, Conti. Meet people. Go outside. Move your body. Meet people. Do the work and help. What's up, Oscar? Stop spamming the comments. Am Shapiro says, no, tell me. Excellent. So the alt-right wing pipeline is about extremism. It is about convincing people of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be an American, and the things that you should be doing going forward. It is heavily entrenched in a violent culture that is about owning other people, both like literally and figuratively. They are, please stop spamming the comments. I'm not a Zionist, please. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and block you right now. Additionally, if you look at people in the alt-right pipeline, you find that they tend to lie a lot. And that is not something that I am doing. I am telling accurate information. So you can miss me with that nonsense. Heavy Chainsaw. I have a question. Do I ask it in the chat or send a request? You put it in the chat. Alrighty. Let's see here. Why do big tech companies and mainstream media seem to censor one side more than the other? I mean, you probably mean that they are censoring Republicans, but that doesn't really happen. Heavy Chainsaw, what mostly happens is the right-wing billionaires that own these platforms, they tend to silence left-wing voices more than others. All right, Oscar, I'm going to go ahead and boot you because you've annoyed me. Harun says great replacement theory. It's not a real thing. Harry Bia says, which party do you support in UK politics? I'm a left-leaning person, so I would go Labour or Greens. Harry Peter says, why is left or right? No one gets in trouble for any of the crimes they commit. That is inaccurate. Lots of people get in trouble for the crimes they commit. Right now, the Republican Party is in charge of the government in America, and so all of the right-wing people are able to get away with all of the crimes that they commit. But if we had let the Democratic Party stay in power for more than 4 years, then we would have seen more people in the Trump administration go to jail, including Donald Trump. Harun says Trump, and I'm just going to go ahead and block you. So shout out to my regular financial contributors, Muzz King, Pliff, Average Joe, It's the Rocketeer, the two Seans, D, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I want to be a resource for you guys. So any way that I can do that, let me do that. I want you to be more informed and more involved in politics. And if I can help you do that, make me do that for you. Use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. And the Discord is great also because there's recommendations there for books and podcasts and activist actions that you can take. And there's a great community there. Sophia says, as a nursing student, I agree that something has to be done about gender inequality. I just don't know if DEI is how to do so. Sophia, I think that's totally fair. But I think at least we need to start with the understanding that DEI is not what the right wing says that it is. Alrighty. Looks like, hold on a second, Kimmy says, even Trump is on tape saying something about the Democrat eat their own because the Democrats will drop a rotten potato before it spoils a bunch. I don't think that that is accurate, Kimmy. I think that sometimes the Democrats eat their own. I think sometimes people that call themselves Democrats inaccurately start throwing shade at other Democrats, and then we create this narrative of Democrats eating their own. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Right. Heavy Chainsaws. Which companies? Facebook is owned by a right-wing billionaire. Twitter is owned by a right-wing billionaire. TikTok's owned by a right-wing billionaire. Every major media organization is owned by a right-wing billionaire. So, yeah. Let's see here. Conbrew says, won't AI increase the likelihood of a water war to happen sooner? What would be a solution? There are non-wastewater versions of cooling AI. So let's just do that, Kimmy says, I'm just saying Trump said it, that they hold each other accountable. Well, Trump is lying as per usual, film at 11. Apostolic Edit says, what you think about the funny beard man? Who, me? I am the funny beard man. I am the funny beard man. Missy Lane, great to see you. One's direct sphere of influence. Yes, 100% Average Joe. I completely agree with that. Although it looks like my connection was momentarily lost. But yes, I completely agree with you on that, Average Joe. I got to start wrapping things up, guys. I've gone for way too long. Missy Lane says, why do people think the billionaires of the past and their families just stopped operating because Elon Musk and Bezos are richer, so old dynasty were rich years ago? They think they are just gone. People see what they are shown, Misty Lane, and they see what's in front of their face. Sophia says, would you agree with temporarily using DEI until we see less race/gender inequality? I would 100%, Sophia. Let's fucking do it. Let's make it happen. I'm down with that. Look at us creating compromise. bipartisanship happening on the Jarrett Berenstein live stream. All right, this has been an excellent live stream, everybody. Great questions, great engagement. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your supports and all the questions. Hold on a second. Ryan says, I knew he was feminine. That's not what your mom called me last night. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Ryan, I fucked your mom. Take care. Bye-bye.